Hello, everyone, and welcome to another session for Positive Vibes. Today, we're going to be discussing interview skills and how you can utilize some of the little skill sets that we're going to discuss today, and how you can put them into practice. Before we get into it, I just want to thank Mr. C for inviting me to discuss this topic with you guys, and I hope that you guys will find it very useful. So let's get into it. So before we get into interview skills, we need to understand what strengths and values are. And in order to do that, I'm just going to allow you guys to I'm going to give you guys a minute to just type in the chat box or in the comment section what you think strengths are and what you think values are, and how you think you can use those in interviews. So I'll just give you guys a minute to do that. Right. Yeah, I'm hoping someone has put something in there. We'll move on. I'll discuss what exactly strengths are and what values are. So strengths are things that you do and most importantly do well. You may have developed this over time, or they may have come naturally to you. You have developed them in your personal life, like in education, volunteering, or at work. So these are things that you just are able to do really well. But then with values, these are a general expression of what is most important to you and what guides your actions and decisions. So the two actually work hand in hand. So if you think about where you work, having the right skills and strengths for a role are essential as you enjoy it more, and you end up developing faster as well. But if you're working with numbers and spreadsheets is not part of something that you like to do, you're unlikely to enjoy it because that's not your strength. That's not something you're into. You're probably someone who's into more artsy stuff. So maybe you would want to take on a role that's more aligned to that way of thinking or way of doing things. But then when it comes to values, the reason why they're very important is that they are what drives you and they're what make you actually happy. So, if you're working in a company where it's not aligning with your core values, maybe some of the things that they do don't align with what you yourself value in life, um, you're unlikely to have the same drive. You're unlikely to have the same happiness with the role. But if you're working for a company whereby the values that they have and the values that you have are aligned, you're able to work with extra attention. You're able to work with extra zeal because you are enjoying yourself. And so that's where it's really important to know your strengths and to know your values as you're looking up jobs and where to apply to. Moving on. So, as we discussed, why are they important? They're important because they outline what you're good at, what you're really, really good at in terms of like just normal working. And then with values, it's also what's driving you and what's making you happy. So let's discuss some of the examples of like what strengths and skills are. It could be things like efficiency, initiative, or adaptability. So these are things that when you're in an interview, you want to be highlighting some of these buzzwords to say, oh yeah, I work very, efficiently. I have experience in showing that, I'm a very adaptable person when I'm working. So those are some of the things, and some of the other examples are also problem solving. You're a creative person, or you're very results focused. These are buzzwords that a lot of interviewers are looking to hear because this is what really shows that you have the type of mentality and the type of work ethic that they have, and a lot of them expect these type of characteristics from someone. For example, enthusiastic or optimistic. Um, you're a team player, you're a leader. They want someone to come in who's going to add value. And these are some of the things that they look for whenever they're discussing or whenever they're interviewing you, to see whether or not you would fit into their company. Stories. When it comes to storytelling, it's really important to master that skill, and it takes a lot of practice to get to a point where you're able to tell a story and to tell an effective story. So one of the things that you want to be doing when you're telling a story is to highlight your strengths and your skills. But then it's hard to really think of a strength and then come up with a story, for example. But it's easier to think of things in a flipped way. So to think of a story and then highlight your strength, if that makes sense. So if you think about, let's say, for example, some of the questions I've listed here, you can start to they can help you to structure your story. For example, if you are asking yourself, when was the time that I felt I was really successful or something? So a question like that would help you to highlight, some of the strengths or some of the values that you as a person has. You can ask yourself, okay, when was the time that I felt strong, energized, or confident in something? What was I doing that made me feel this way? So these are some of the questions that you should be asking yourself whenever you're about to answer a question in an interview. To think about, okay, they've asked me this. When was the time that I felt like this? As opposed to thinking, okay, I want to talk about my communication skills. When was it? It's going to take you too long. But then if you think about just quick little stories and practicing as well, as I've mentioned, you're able to think, oh, okay, if they're asking me, okay, how do you work in a team, for example, you're able to think quickly about a time at which you really showed that you're a great team worker. Maybe it was you had to put together an event with people and then you had to delegate a bunch of stuff and work with those people and all that stuff. So these are things that one has to be practicing over time. So I'm just going to give you guys a minute to think about answering some of the questions that are here. So just to think of a story where you've highlighted some of these things. For example, when was the time that you felt strong, energized, or confident? What was it that you were doing? So I'm just going to give you guys a minute just to do that. Right, let's move forward. So part of storytelling, there's a structured way that a lot of people have actually taken upon, and they've proved that this is a very effective way of telling a story. And we're just going to discuss that. But before I get into it, I just want to know if anyone actually knows what type of method I'm actually talking about. So if you know, just feel free to put it in the chat box or in the comment section, just to put in what exactly we're about to discuss right now. Yeah, so if you guessed STAR method, that was absolutely correct. That's what we're going to discuss right now. So the STAR method is basically a technique or a technique that's been developed as a way of structuring your story. We're going to get into what each letter stands for, because it's a bit of an acronym, and there'll be, each letter stands for something, and you have to be addressing each part of it as you're answering your question. So it just helps you to get like a clear structure of how to answer a question or how to tell a story. So if we move forward, yeah, so we're just gonna move into really getting into the STAR method and what each letter stands for. So the first part of it is situation. So this is very important to set the scene, because a lot of times, you've got all these stories in your mind, but without context, the person who's interviewing you will not understand what you're talking about. They will be getting so confused. Okay, what are you talking about? Or what's the situation here? So it's important to really set the scene whenever you're answering a question or you're telling a story. And one of the examples of how you can even get into that is just to start by saying, at my previous job, and then you get into your story. So what you've done there is you've set the scene to say, you've put a picture in the person's mind to say, okay, at my previous job. So now they're thinking about your history, and then you move on to the next part of storytelling, which is to now highlight what the task was. So this is just to highlight what the problem was and exactly what it was. So you have to be very concise with it. You don't want to blabber on and say a bunch of stuff and then they get lost as to what task we're even trying to address. And another part is the action. So this will be, I would say, the bulk of your story. This is where you're now saying exactly what you were doing, how you even did it, what skills and strengths you used to complete the task. So this is where you really drive home your point. And the last part of it all is the result. This is like the overarching of the whole story, to say, this was the situation, this was the task, this was the action, and this was the result. This is why I told you this story. I told you this story to tell you about these amazing facts about, or these amazing stats about, oh, when I did this, it resulted in a 50% increase in sales, for example. When I did this, there was, I don't know, we got 20% more customers to come into the shop, for example. So this is where now you're making things, you're showing the value in what you were doing. You're showing the value in yourself as well. So it's a very strong way to finish off your story. And just to go back to, some of the examples of how you can get into some of these things, as I've already mentioned, with situation, one of the great ways to start off is at my previous job. With tasks, you can just say, I was asked to do this. I was asked to, I don't know, take the laundry out, for example. I mean, that's just a silly example, but it's just how you can even get into it. And with action, you can start off by just saying, I took these steps. And then you just go on to then list all the steps that you took on to address the task. But it's really important to also be careful when you're talking about your actions, because it's very easy to start to waffle. So you need to be able to just say your steps in almost bullet point format when you're speaking, and not just to waffle on, because then you end up losing the interviewer, because they are now getting caught up in trying to keep up with you. So it's very important to be concise. And with results, you can just say, and the outcome was 30% increase in customers coming into the shops, for example. It's just a great way to finish it off and to just highlight what actually was the result of all this. What was the point of all this? What was the benefit of it? And I'm just going to give you guys some tips of, the STAR method and some of the things that you can do. Very importantly, the first one, use different examples for each situation-based question. You don't want to be in an interview and whatever question they're asking you, you keep giving the same story every single time. They're gonna think you're a one-trick pony. So they want to know different scenarios, to highlight your strengths and skills. So you need to be able to practice a bunch of stories, a bunch of stories to highlight your skills and your strengths. So it's important to have different examples. Be precise and detailed. Remember, you're telling a story. So you need to be precise and you need to be detailed. You don't want to waffle on as well. You don't want to, because a lot of interviews, there's a limited amount of time that they have. An interviewer, they have their day-to-day job. They don't have the whole day to be interviewing one person. So you need to be precise and you need to be detailed with your answers, straight to the point, and only include relevant information. You don't want to start talking about something that's totally off topic, something that they didn't even ask you about. So you need to be able to listen to what they've asked and to address the questions that they've asked and just give them the relevant information. That way they know, this person, is they're good at what they know. They're good at answering questions. They are good at knowing what the questions are and addressing them properly. You don't want to just waffle and give them irrelevant information. You can use examples from work, school, college, volunteering, university. The list goes on and on. You're not limited to just having to talk about work. You're not limited to just having to talk about school. There's a bunch of different examples that you can use, and in different situations you are able to see what your strengths are. So you're perfectly fine to be using any example. And if as you practice the STAR method, you actually end up realizing it goes beyond just STAR. There's an extra R that's there. And this is the one that's, I would say, probably the most important one when you're answering questions in an interview, because the ability to be able to reflect on your story, it really shows that you're a forward thinker. You're someone who thinks back at what they've done and is able to learn lessons from it and to say, okay, even if, let's say, I end up with a 30% increase in customers, what could I have done better to even get more than just 30% increase? And, companies that are interviewing you love this because they can see that you're someone who's not only here to tick tasks and go home, but at the same time they're able to reflect and to find ways of improving on top of whatever they've already been doing, on top of their tasks. You're able to say, I can do this more efficiently if I do this and that. Right. Now we're just going to go into a time where we will discuss how you should prepare for an interview. Just give me one sec. When I'm looking this way, guys, I'm just looking at my other screen for notes. So we're just going to discuss how to prepare for an interview. And I'll just move to the next slide. When you're preparing for an interview, it's important to really analyze the job description. So a lot of companies will have the job description where they're listing their expectations, the type of person they're looking for, and sometimes they'll discuss what they're even offering you. So it's important to be able to analyze that before you go into an interview. And it's also like the best piece of information that you have about what they're expecting, and you're able to also sort of prepare for the questions that they might ask you based off the job description that they've given you. So when you're now analyzing the job description, you want to be able to highlight all the skills and requirements needed for the job. Some companies will literally tell you, this is the skills that we're after. Some companies will not do that. So it's important to be able to highlight, okay, when they're saying this, that means they're looking for someone who is able to communicate. Maybe they will just say, we need someone who will be sending out an email every day, for example. That just shows they want someone who's able to communicate. So you need to be having an example where you're able to show this is how I communicate, and I've got a history of showing that I've got communication skills and all that stuff. I highlight all relevant information about the role. So this is when they'll be telling you what they're expecting you to be doing. Things like what I've already said. We need someone to be sending out an email, for example, every day or every week, for example. So you need to be able to highlight the relevant information about each role. And also highlighting all relevant information about a company. Some companies may do that where they'll tell you about who they are, what their values are, what their work environment is like. Some companies may not do that. We'll discuss later on how you can even find out more about a company. But from a job description point of view, it's important to highlight information about the company, because it's good to in an interview. It's good to talk about the company to show that you've researched this company, to show that you know what this company is about, what their values are, and you can show that I want to be part of this type of company. So all these things that we've gone through, all that's there, all the whole purpose of it all is for you to prepare your own questions. So as you prepare your own questions, you're trying to think about, okay, what could they ask me? What type of things could they ask me to say? Oh, tell me about this time, blah, blah. So you need to prepare for those things. And that way, when you've prepared your own questions and what you think they'll ask you, you can then start to practice your stories and to practice, okay, I'm going to talk about this story if they ask me this. I'm going to talk about that story if they ask me this. So it's important to really, really analyze a job description. I can't stress this enough, but it's really important. You don't want to go in there blind. You want to be prepared as much as possible. Like I said, you can never, like, the job description is just not enough. There's plenty of ways that one has to really, really go into research about the job, or about the type of roles and what they're expecting out of it, the type of company, what their work environment is like. It's really important to immerse yourself in a company before you even go into the interview. To speak their language is very important. And one of the places where you can do that is simply by going to the company's website. A lot of companies will be on their websites, they will highlight what their values are, what their principles are, and what drives them. They will highlight even what projects they're working on, what previous projects they've done, whether they have clients that they have, and then they'll have those type of things like case studies where you can read through, and then in an interview now you can be like, oh, I was on your website and I noticed there's a case study where you did this and that with this company. I was really impressed, and I think that type of stuff I can be able to bring more value and to do things even better, or to, I don't know, that type of stuff. It's really good to immerse yourself in a company before you go into an interview. Social media. A lot of companies these days, they're all over social media. They're trying to reach people. So it's important to be able to follow those social media accounts. And that way you're able to see what type of stuff they post, the type of language they use. You might have different company A where they talk very chill, they talk very relaxed. And then you might have company B, where they are a bit more formal, where the stuff that they say is very formal, is very structured in a certain way. So you're able to then know how they speak, to learn the company's language. Another example is news sites. See what other companies, what these news companies are talking about when it comes to these companies. What type of publicity do they have from all these news institutions? It just helps you to see what type of company that you're applying for. You're able to even see whether or not they align with your values. If this company is constantly getting bad media and you're not aligning with their values, that could be even a sign that maybe this company is not aligning with you. But in the case that it is, you're able to see that, they get so much praise out of, all these journalists and all that stuff. So I want to work for this type of company. Google. I probably should have had this as the first thing to do. Just Google. Just go on Google and type in that company and see what comes up. And another one that wasn't listed on there is things like LinkedIn. There's Glassdoor. Glassdoor, I quite like it as well because some companies, they may not, on their job descriptions, they may not highlight the salary that they're going to be offering you, for example. So it's important to also just go on Glassdoor because a lot of times with, I don't know about the smaller companies, but like with the bigger companies, you can just go on Glassdoor, type in the role, type in the company, and then you're able to see the type of salaries that people get. So it's driven by people who worked in those roles, and then they just go into Glassdoor and put in, okay, I earn 25,000 a year and all that stuff, and then they then use those numbers to come up with an expected salary for someone who's applying for that role. So I find that to be quite useful with a lot of jobs and all that stuff. And also another topic we're gonna go into on top of the STAR method is just effective communication in an interview. Verbal. So to communicate effectively, there's two aspects to it. There's the verbal aspect. So you want to use appropriate language. You want to speak not too slow, not too fast. You want to speak in a way where someone who's listening to you is able to understand and keep up with you. And they're not then like, oh, you spoke very fast. What did you say again? So you want to speak at a very steady pace. And also the tone of voice that you're using. You don't want to come across as harsh. You want to just speak in a very relaxed manner. And another part of communication is the non-verbal aspect of things. Body language says a lot of things. If you're in an interview and, let me just do this, and you're sitting back like this, it's bad body language. You want to sit up and to, show that you're here, you're present, you're not just coming into this thing like, yeah, yeah, yeah. Another thing is appearance. You want to dress the part. And these days, with COVID happening, you still want to dress up a certain way. You don't want to just show up there in a vest, wearing shorts and all that stuff. You still want to be dressed in a professional manner. There's also gestures. You don't want to just be. Sometimes that can be distracting. So where you don't want to have too many hand gestures, but hand gestures are also good to drive a point. They also show that you're really thinking about things and you're able to really focus someone. Eye contact as well is really important. People think just because we're not face to face, there's no need for eye contact. It's good to face, the person that you're talking to if you're doing a virtual interview. The same way when you're in a face to face interview, you need to be focused on the person and talking directly at them, with them. Just some extra interviewing top tips on top of what we've already gone through. With virtual interviews, make sure that your tech is working the night before. You don't want to just 5 minutes before and then suddenly your Skype is not working. You want to test it out and make sure that's working before you're going to the interview. As I've mentioned, dress as if you're going into a face-to-face interview. So no pajamas, for example. Just dress the part. And show that you're prepared for the interview. So analyze your job descriptions. Think about the type of questions they might ask you. Think about the stories. Think about the stories that you'll tell them. Practice them before you go in there. Have your CV in front of you. A lot of people think that you just need to go in there on your own, nothing else. Have your CV in there in front of you. If they ask you a question, you're able to just do a quick glance and see, oh yeah, I've got this on my thingy, and just talk about it. You can even give them a copy of your CV if they don't have it. Display enthusiasm for the job. Show that you want to work for these people. Show that you want to be part of the company. And one way of doing that is just to show enthusiasm, show that you're excited for this job. And sometimes people get nervous in an interview and they start to fidget a lot. Maybe you're just doing that or something like that. A good technique is to just have a water bottle, and if they ask you a question and you feel like you're about to panic, just take the water bottle, have a quick sip, put it down. It's giving you a time to just calm down, think about what they've asked you, and to come up with an answer for it. It's just a clever way of buying time for yourself. Ask questions about next steps or progression. This is good to ask those type of questions about, what's the typical career progression for someone at this level, that type of stuff. But one thing to stay away from is to ask things about salaries. That's something to discuss later on. So you want to avoid that. You don't want to just come across as someone who's just here for the money. Some don'ts. Don't show up late. Whether it's face-to-face or virtual interview, don't show up late. If you're going to show up late, you need to be able to communicate that with good time, not 2 minutes before the interview, you're calling them up, oh, I can't make it. No, you need to tell them with plenty of time that I'm going to show up late, and, tell them why you're showing up late. Never assume that you can just wing something. Always prepare. Always show that you're prepared in an interview. You don't want to just show up and then you're just waffling. People will pick up on things. Don't just slouch or fidget. Make sure you're sitting up and you're not just fidgeting or playing around with the pen or something like that. This is a really good one. Don't say negative things about previous employers. It just comes across bad on your part. That why are you just talking badly about your previous employer? This person that you want to employ you will feel like, well, if you're talking about your previous employers like this, what more about me? So they wouldn't want to hire someone like that. So just don't do that. Have a loud, disruptive background. Try to be somewhere that's quiet when it comes to virtual interviews. You don't want to be in an area where there is someone playing this very loud music. Maybe you might need to drive to a park and just be in your car, for example, or it's quiet. I don't know. Just find somewhere quiet where you're able to there's no outside noise to disrupt the interview. And, just to finish things off, I guess, confidence. You need to show that you're confident in yourself. And part of gaining confidence is just simply practicing. Practice, practice, practice. That's how you build your confidence when it comes to interviews. So you need to practice your stories. You need to practice what type of questions they might ask you. You need to practice analyzing job descriptions. You need to do all those things. You need to Google the companies and all that stuff. And if you have people that you live with, you might even ask them to interview you, to do a mock interview. I've done a lot of like mock interviews with a charity that I work with, where they work with a lot of young people. I help them out and I go in there as an interviewer with like this mock job that I have, and I'm just interviewing those people. And a lot of times they come back and say, one of the things that you highlighted for me to learn, I was able to even do it in an interview, and I thank you and all that stuff. It's really good to just do a lot of practice with these things. It's not something that you can just wing. Yeah, like I said, prepare, have a positive mindset, challenge yourself, breathing and power stance. Like, just relax, breathe, and have a power stance. The power stance is really important. It just shows your confidence. If you're sitting like this, you're having a power stance. And another thing as well, let's say, when COVID is done, another thing to also take note of is handshakes. When you're going into a face-to-face interview and you're shaking this person's hand, you wanna, have a little firm hand grip on them. You don't want to squeeze their hand too painfully, but you want to do it just enough to show that you're there. You're a powerful person. You've got so much confidence. I believe there's even been studies around that to show that it's a really powerful way of showing your confidence when you're getting into an interview with someone. Yeah, and that comes to the end of my presentation. I hope that you guys found it to be useful. And I just want to thank Positive Vibes for giving me this opportunity to just come here and discuss this topic with you guys. Yeah, I look forward to more engagements and attending some of these sessions, because from talking to Mr. C, I think there's big plans, big things coming soon. So goodbye, guys. Peace.